glad that you've been able to join us in our next webinar here in California. And I know that there are many of you from California that are joining us, but I also want to recognize that there are many who are joining us from other states and actually from international areas too. So thank you so much. First, I want to introduce myself. I am Liz Harvey Roberts, Chief Development Officer for the California chapter of the Nature Conservancy. And as many of you know, we are a place-based organization in that we take science and we apply it in places around the world. So we're going to hear a little bit more about that today. And we thank you very much for spending some of your time with us today and throughout this series, really. So after Meredith finishes her presentation, it's going to be about 20 or 25 minutes. We're going to have time for question and answer. And again, encourage your participation in that. And at this point, I think it's time to introduce Meredith. So Meredith, please tell us about yourself. Tell us about your connection to conservation and how you got started with the Nature Conservancy.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you all. Well, hi everyone. My name is Meredith de la Garza. Thanks for being with us today. And I want to start with a brief reflection. I'm aware that now more than ever, it is a moment to be deeply grateful about being healthy and safe. And I really hope that you, your families, and neighborhoods and communities are well. Thank you for being here, willing to learn more about ongoing endeavors to build a future where both people and nature can thrive in the Gulf of California in Mexico. Before I start, I will share a bit about myself. I grew up between Monterrey and Mexico City and other cities in Mexico. I have a bachelor's degree in international affairs and a master's program in environmental education. And one of my first aspirations was being part of the team in charge of the US-Mexico border environmental negotiations that were part of the NAFTA. But life had another plans. And about 23 years ago, around this season of the year, I made a road and camping trip in the Baja California Peninsula, and I totally fall in love with this region. After this adventure, I realized, I decided that I wanted to dedicate my life to environmental and marine conservation. I worked for 10 years for ProNatura, and then I worked for another 10 years for Ni Paraja, a more local NGO with a very hands-on approach here in the Gulf of California. And 2 years ago, I joined TNC Mexico and Northern Central America as the Oceans Program Director. I wanted to be part of an organization able to deploy solutions that have worked in other parts of the world. I also oversee the oceans, the Mesoamerican Reef Initiatives. And I have a deep conviction. I am sure, because I have witnessed that natural capital can be a source of wealth and pride, and that communities can only thrive when they know how to use this natural capital. However, this doesn't happen just by magic, and we must work very hard to achieve that. And again, I'm very happy to be in a position where I can bring my passion and my expertise and with the talent from TNC to work towards a better future. And now let's start. Well, today we will talk about different initiatives aimed at advancing towards two of our global strategies: protect oceans, lands, and water, and provide food and water sustainably. Next. TNC has contributed to the protection of over 120 million of acres around the world, and we have presence in the US and other 79 countries in the 5 continents. Next. And now let's zoom in and talk about the Gulf of California. And I will start with a very brief history of this region. About 5 million years ago, after earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, a part of the continent drifted apart and became a peninsula. Now the waters that surround this peninsula develop exceptional characteristics. The Gulf of California, once labeled, also known as the Sea of Cortez for further references, and was once labeled by Jacques Cousteau as the aquarium of the world. This region has extraordinary biodiversity. And more importantly, or it's also very important, this is the only sea that belongs exclusively to one country. So in all the world, this is the only marine region that has the enormous opportunities to be managed just by one country, by Mexico. And this represents unique opportunities and also a huge responsibility. This region is home to over 700 species of fishes, 36 species of mammals, which comprise 25% of existing marine mammals in the world are present here, and also 5 species of sea turtles. Next. And I will pause to make a detail about some of my favorite animals that we can find here. This includes the whale shark, which is the largest fish on Earth. In some parts of the Gulf, it's very easy to swim along them, and it brings a lot of calm to be next to these gentle giants. Next. The Gulf is also home to the largest animal that has ever existed, and this is the blue whale. We can find this charismatic species every winter in the Loreto National Park, around 20 miles here from La Paz, where I live. And just to give you an idea, a blue whale is larger than 3 big buses lined, and just the tongue can be as big as an elephant. And the heart can have the same size of a small car. Next. Another frequent visitor is the gray whale. These animals have the largest migration for a marine mammal. In winter, they come to the coastal lagoons in the Pacific coast to mate and give birth because of the protective environments that they find here. Mexico committed with the conservation of this species decades ago, and it's one of the most promising histories of success. Some whales approach the boat with their calves, and if you are lucky, you can touch them if they allow. And for me, that was one of the experiences that made me change completely my career and dedicate to marine conservation. And this is me petting a whale. Next. And of course, not just iconic species thrive in this region. Over 88,000 fishers depend on these marine resources that generate over $900 million annually. Mexico ranks 16 at global level in terms of fisheries production. And 7 out of 10 pounds of seafood that we consume or export come from either the Gulf of California or the Pacific, I mean by the waters that surround the peninsula. So the region is so abundant that provides 70% of the Mexican fisheries. And some of the most abundant fisheries include shrimp, squid, tuna, and sardines. Mexico has the second largest fish market in the world after Japan in Mexico City. And visiting this market is like a complete cultural and social experience. Next. And the region also attracts 2 million visitors every year who leave an economic flow of about $2 billion. So tourism is one of the main sources of income for the 5 states around the Gulf of California. Next. However, and sadly, this region is at peril. The abundance of this region sometimes has led to a collective idea of bounty and endless productivity. And the region can indeed provide incomes and many intangible benefits for millions, but this requires careful management and a deep understanding of this complex ecosystem. Over 30% of the peninsula is protected, the land part. However, only 7% of the waters that surround the peninsula are protected, which is a sheer contrast. And even the area under protection faces increasing challenges as budgets decline and pressure over the resources increase. From the around 350 species that are commercially harvested, only 1 in 10 species is sustainably managed. The rest are either collapse, overexploit, or harvest at maximum capacity. Besides, we lose critical habitats at an accelerated rate because we still lack enough coastal regulations that make compatible development and conservation. And mangroves are one of the ecosystems that we are losing at a higher speed, and this is particularly relevant in the face of climate change. Next. Since 1996, TNC works in this region to overcome this challenge, but also to build opportunities and capacities for a better future for people and nature. Along this year, TNC has played a critical role creating natural protected areas, not just land, but also marine, but also fostering the needed capacities for effective management with the stakeholders like government, other NGOs, users, protecting pristine habitat through acquisition and conservation easements, bringing additional scientific and financial resources to the region, and enabling the conditions to build a regional vision with our partners. Next. And in this history of collaboration, we have identified and accelerated emerging opportunities. And I picked just 3 of them. There's so much more opportunities, but I want to choose 3 that I feel very personally connected with. Organized fishers and communities are already the center of different successful conservation initiatives. At TNC, we were part of a regional effort to create a network of no-take zones with the specific purpose of replenishing commercial fisheries. TNC worked very hard to develop the methodology to make sure that every site was selected with the best science available. And one of the examples that is very promising is one in which we collaborate with TNC California. Together, we are supporting a group of fishers to obtain and analyze data for their potential community concession through electronic monitoring. And that allows them, with a very streamlined and effective way, to make better decisions about how much and when to harvest. And this is part of the many collaborations that we have with the California chapter. Another reason to be optimistic is that now science and evidence demonstrate that we can recover fisheries if certain areas are closed. Some of these initiatives led by local fishers and by other NGOs, we have already witnessed that biomass can increase up to 30% when the no-take zones are properly managed. Complementary funds from TNC and also scientific and technical resources were invested in this effort. And finally, another reason to be optimistic is that we are all witnessing an increasing interest on consuming sustainable seafood. More and more people want to know where do our food come from. And this is very important because this can unleash several opportunities for local fishers here. And after these years, like, we know that nature is resilient, and today more than ever, it's important to understand how it works and to know how to conserve it. Next. And with all that said, I will now dedicate some minutes to talk about an ongoing initiative that comprises many of the strategies that we implement here. Marismas Nacionales, just in the south, it's where the Gulf of California meets the Pacific, in the white square that you can see in your screens. This is the most important mangrove system in northwestern Mexico. Wetlands are critical habitats for many commercial and non-commercial species in the Gulf of California and the Pacific Ocean. Just to give you an idea, a recent study shows that an hectare of healthy mangrove can produce up to $38,000 in fisheries productivity. And Marismas Nacionales has 80,000 hectares of mangrove. These coastal lagoons attract thousands of fishermen, such as Juan de Dios, and Juan de Dios is one of them. In the race to catch as much shrimp as possible, they have unsustainable practices that affect not just the species, but the ecosystem on which they all rely. And the product is sold with so little added value and at a very low price. This brings a unique challenge and opportunities. The market can play an essential role to create a new dynamic for Juan de Dios and the thousands of fishers in the region. And TNC, we are dedicated to setting systems in place to unleash the power of markets and consumers like you and me to accelerate the transition to sustainability. Next. Can you go next? Yes, thank you. Well, and what are we doing to make this possible? With our project aims to link Juan de Dios and other fishers to more profitable markets through improved sustainable fishing practices, but also adding value to their production. As thousands of fishers in Mexico, Juan de Dios is trapped in a cycle of poverty, debt, and under the control of 2 or 3 buyers who determine the price and even the amount that they catch. And they have no interest in sustainability. Buyers and middlemen can play a critical role to transition to sustainability, but this is not the case for this fishery, or at least not yet, and we want to change that. Currently, tons of shrimp are dry and sold with little added value in local markets that don't consider fishing practices or the size and quality of the product. Years ago, Juan de Dios approached other NGOs and other fellow fishermen and decided that they were ready to embark on a process to improve their fishery so they could engage with buyers willing to pay more. This will be a long journey and we are joining them. Our role consists on structuring a fisheries improvement project, identifying the most suitable certification for them to achieve what they want, engaging buyers and potential investors to make this possible. We're also working with Juan de Dios and other fishers to enable the conditions for success. If we succeed together in this model will have a triple benefit: the environment, the fishery, and the fishers' income and well-being. The deal will impact, in the first stage, at least 900 direct fishers, and this is completely scalable. What we want is to unleash a virtual cycle where sustainability is rewarded. We also want to enable the conditions to increase the number of sustainable fisheries in the Gulf of California, which as I said, is just 1 in 10 are sustainably harvested. And this is particularly relevant in the face of COVID-19, since fishers will need the skills to thrive in the changing market. We have already witnessed that organized fishers are being more resilient in this crisis, but there's a lot that needs to be done on that regard. Next. Next, please. Well, and not just Juan de Dios is struggling, but thousands of fishers and their coastal communities are facing the devastating impact of COVID-19. We as societies are facing uncertainty and incapacity to plan ahead. This crisis is destroying local and national economies and disrupting food and commerce systems on which fisheries rely. Some of the trends is that seafood is mostly served in restaurants or travels or social gatherings. And these events we all know are almost non-existing now. Oh, no, previous slide, please. Sorry. Sadly, coastal communities are highly vulnerable with high rates of diabetes, hypertension, and lack of access to the health system. However, and this is the beacon of hope, we also know that organized cooperatives and communities are being more prepared to overcome the crisis, and they are leading the way towards a fastest recovery. We need to act fast to create these capacities in communities in this vital moment. Our job is to reach out, document impacts, and anticipate, and we are very committed to being sensitive, being relevant, and building new opportunities in this scheme. Next. As I said, the fishing sector is highly vulnerable, and it has limited access to social security. And we want to be very relevant, and we want to provide like game changer solutions in this crisis. These inequalities hinder the community's capacity to use their natural resources wisely. Some months ago, we started assessing the possibility of conducting an ad hoc debt for nature swap, where fishers could reduce the cost of social security in exchange to conservation outcomes. This is very relevant because the lack of economic opportunities accelerates the rate of overfishing, because that's a way to offset the lack of savings or the lack of other social benefits. The COVID crisis disrupted most of our assumptions. Like, I think at this point we're all familiar with this situation, but also evidence that this kind of innovation can be a game changer to rebuild after the crisis. We are dedicated to build opportunities for this kind of financial instruments. Next. And I want to start closing with this talk. The use of our natural capital provides not just an income, but a myriad of other benefits. Our natural capital must be a source of wealth and pride, and not a source of conflict or concerns. If we get this right the next 10 years, we can make possible a world where the natural capital is that, a source of wealth and pride, and not just a source of conflict. People and nature can thrive together. Next. And you can have a lasting impact for people and nature here in the Gulf of California. We need your support to advance our ocean conservation efforts. Next. And because we know that together we can transform this crisis into opportunities for sustainable fisheries. We have a critical window to achieve more resilient oceans and communities with benefits for everybody. Next. And well, thank you for listening. In a more perfect world, we would be here together listening to this in person. This is not possible, so we are accommodating to this situation. And even with all the benefits that the technology provides, it is impossible to convey the beauty of this region. So I will rely on Steinbeck, who described the Sea of Cortez in such a unique way. And thank you for listening. I will be very happy to answer your questions.
Well, thank you so much, Meredith, and thank you all for listening. We learned so much during your presentation, so now it's time for questions and answers. So again, if you haven't had the chance to submit a question, please do so via the bar on the bottom of your screen. And we do have a number that have been queued up, so I'm anxious to get to those. And I just want to say before we start that I have a special connection to this landscape because I've been going down to Baja for about 20 years now each year. And I've had the chance to snorkel and sail at Cabo Pumo and Espiritu Santo. So I've seen firsthand some of the beautiful marine values as well as the terrestrial values of Baja. And it's just a wonderful place to connect to sun and surf. So with that, let's get started. I would love to just kick us off with my own question, if I'm going to take this chance. And that is, how does the California chapter collaborate with you? And tell us about that relationship and how it has benefited the program in Mexico and California.
Sure, thank you, Liz. Well, overall, I would say that the California chapter is the scientific hub for most of the technological and scientific tools that we use in our fisheries program in Mexico, and I'm going to give two examples. We started collaborating more closely in 2017, and since then we have been working in an ongoing effort to bring the best available and suitable tools and technology for fisheries management, both at national level. We work with the National Fisheries Institute with technology developed in California to streamline how to make the better decisions when you don't have enough information or enough resources to manage your fisheries. So there's a toolkit for that, and we work with that. But we also work at community level using another kind of tools. So communities can have, like here in La Paz, there's a community with a pen shell concession, and they have found very useful the use of some tools to make sure how to make the better harvest decisions in a timely and fast way. That would be two examples.
Great. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Well, let me switch to Jonathan's question. Is it challenging to work with the Mexican government? How do you have progress in the middle of such governance challenges?
Well, it's certainly a challenge. And we combine a set of solutions, which some of them, of course, depend on the government, but also that some of them depend on creating strong communities with the needed tools to thrive. We have also found very useful to work with middle staff who is not very susceptible to turnover or to political parties. And we have a very close connection, like a 5-year training program with the core staff of the fisheries institution with whom we work very hard and very closely, regardless of who is the director of those institutions. And as it becomes harder to work at federal level, we also realize that we need to unleash the power of people to come up with their own solutions. Because markets, people, communities, technology can provide a lot of solutions, and we are concentrated on that.
Okay, thank you very much. So Susan is asking, is there an organized effort to oversee land development in the Gulf of California, such as the Coastal Commission? So I think she's talking about development around the coast.
No, fortunately, no. There are like federal institutions like the Ministry for the Environment, and there are other state level efforts. But there's no like a regional comprehensive effort to make these kinds of decisions. So some of the decisions rely on municipal level, some on state level, and some on federal level.
Okay, thank you. Roger is asking, is there any interest in creating a marine sanctuary in the Gulf or in creating marine protected areas?
That's a great question. We are very, there's always interest in increasing the amount of protection, but that comes with a lot of nuances. No? During the history of the conservation in the Gulf of California, most of the efforts have been concentrated on the Ministry for the Environment. And now we are working so that the Ministry for Fisheries is also engaged in marine conservation or in marine conservation tools. So that's why we define this methodology to select no-take zones, and our partners, us with our partners work on with communities deciding which are the best places to close with a very community-based level approach. I think at least the 2 or 3 next years is going to be very hard to get like a big marine protected area. So instead of that, we are working at local level with fishers who are already engaged and interested in this initiative. No?
So I think that leads us to the next question, which is related. Why are we working in that region, and why white shrimp small-scale fishery and not an industrial fishery?
Yes. Well, industrial fisheries, whether we like it or not, are already on a trend to being certified. Not just the US market is demanding more, but also the Mexican government is demanding that most of the industrial fleet is certified as an by the MSC or other certifications. So we identify that the industrial fleet is already on their way for that, and we can add more value working with fishers. Once, or if all the industrial fisheries were certified, we want that artisanal fishers can also compete with certified fisheries. And the white shrimp provides like both opportunities. It's a small scale fishery, but it attracts thousands of fishers and leaves thousands and thousands of dollars of income. So it's the right balance between impact and benefits for the environment.
Thank you. So Peter is asking, where is the next Cabo Pulmo in the region?
The next, well, that's a great question. There is this, it's not as commercially marketed, but this network of no-take zones that were created 10 years ago have shown very similar results as Cabo Pulmo. They are not as accessible for visiting, and they were more designed like to replenish fisheries outside of the small protected area. But I have been diving in Cabo Pulmo in the other places, and the other places just in 5 or 7 years have shown very similar results. Cabo Pulmo has been protected for 25 years, these other places for only 7. So even if it's not the same outcome for tourism, I think that in terms of biodiversity, very probably this small network of no-take zones, they are going to have very surprising results if we keep a close eye on that.
Thank you, Meredith. All right, so Joseph is asking, what are the efforts to clean up discarded fish nets and prevent the overboard disposal of old nets?
For like the fishing gear in the ocean, like pollution?
Yeah. discarded fishing gear? Yeah.
Yes, no, that's a very good question. We are aware of that problem. We don't have, unfortunately, we don't have now a TNCA program concentrated on ocean pollution. I know that other NGOs are coalescing different efforts, not just to reduce plastic consumption, but also to address that. Honestly, we are not involved in those efforts, but I'm glad to research more about and share information about who is doing that work.
Well, Meredith, you can come to California and we'll share what we're doing because we do have programs in those areas. So we'd be happy to share. So Dale is asking, has COVID impacted illegal fisheries driving the vaquita to extinction? And can this TNC model contribute to that issue too?
Yes, I think one of the many, well, COVID has impact in many different ways. I understand that the demand for this totoaba, this fish, this demand that is driven by the Asian market, it has changed a bit. It has decreased. China is getting more protected from importing either legal or illegal fisheries. But still, the problem is so huge that I don't think that will help with the crisis. There are so few vaquitas left in the environment and so many pressures on them. In the Upper Gulf, one of our initiatives consists more on connecting the Colorado River with the Gulf of California. We don't work with the vaquita effort, and our decisions comes from a very hard place. There's a lot of national and international NGOs working there, and we try to identify more a place where we can add a value or set up like an interest for change. And the vaquita, even if it's overwhelming, it has like Greenpeace and WWF and at least 15 other NGOs. So we are investing our resources in other places with less presence of other NGOs.
And Meredith, that's true around the world, and for the benefit of those listening to this webinar, we really do choose where to use our resources because while we're the largest NGO in conservation, at the same time, we employ about 4,000 people. So it's not that many people when you're trying to address worlds around or issues around the globe. So we do really try to go where we're needed, and we don't try to duplicate efforts of other nonprofit conservation groups, although we will definitely partner where needed. So that is a very consistent message. So thank you. Chris is asking, is it true all Mexican islands are now strict nature reserves, Pacific and Gulf sides, and restricted from U.S. sport fishing boats?
Well, there's nuances on that. All the islands are federal property. So, and all the islands are part of the biosphere reserve of the islands of the Gulf of California. So some of the tiny parts of the islands that still have a private owner, is it because like a mistake or a duplication of like ownership? But legally all the islands, the land part of the island belongs to Mexico, and all are part of a biosphere reserve. Now, the water that surrounds the island, some of them are part of protected areas such as Espiritu Santo and Cabo Pulmo, and some of them are not part of a protected area. And even if they are part of a marine protected area, in Mexico, marine protected areas allow for a combined use of fishing and conservation. So not all the marine protected areas are no-take zones in Mexico, just the core of the protected area. And we get this question a lot, like everybody's like alarmed, like why are they fishing in the marine protected area? And sometimes that may be allowed or sometimes not.
Thank you very much. So Susan is asking, are there any new developments in the status of the gray whales that utilize the lagoons in the Gulf?
I'm sorry, could you please repeat the last part?
Sure, the status of the gray whales in the Gulf that utilize the lagoons there for breeding.
Oh, most of the whales are recovering, and none of the threats to the whales are like originated in the Gulf of California. Like climate change is affecting them like globally, but all the like land-based threats are under control here in Mexico. All the coastal lagoons in the Pacific are protected. The Loreto National Park is protected for blue whales. So I would say that most of the land-based threats are eliminated, at least in this part of the country. But of course, they receive a lot of pressure from like climate change and other issues that go beyond Mexican jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you. Jim is asking, will the Nature Conservancy be conducting trips to this area?
Like if
How can we come see you?
Oh,
how can we see this work?
Well, technically, like tourism is allowed now since 2 days ago. So technically hotels are opening like yesterday and today. But I would not advise that in the short term. Like TNC is taking a very cautious approach to this. So we're not allowed to travel or receive travelers, or we are not allowed to encourage traveling in the, I don't know, like the next months. So technically you can visit. We would not advise that. But we're sure that hopefully within a year, everything is going to be under control, and we will be very happy to receive everybody. I know all these big trips still take like a year or 18 months to plan if we want everything to run smoothly. So we don't recommend to do it soon, but eventually we'll be very happy to have you here.
Thank you. That's great. It's good to hear. And Jim, we'll give you more information in the summary of questions. We'll make sure to provide whatever travel information that we do have about trips that are coming up. Okay, Dale is asking, U.S. Fish and Wildlife had an international grant program that provided funding to NGOs and Mexican states for wildlife and environmental education. Is that program continuing in Baja California?
I think so. I know some partners who have used those resources for, I think there's a big program related to wetlands. We receive another kind of federal funds. We are currently working with California with funds from the Department of State in a fisheries program. But yes, I think that federal program is still running in Mexico. We don't have grants with them, but I know they do have money available for that.
Okay, good. And I'm going to go to another question here that was provided ahead of time. Why are you working in the region? Oh, we asked this, sorry. Can you talk about the debt for nature swap? So you alluded to that in your presentation, but we'd like to hear more about that.
Sure. Well, we realize, and we have like over 80% of fishers cannot cover their social security fees or don't have savings to retire. And it's documented that it has like a triple impact. It's very hard to be sustainable when you don't have your future sure, and uncertainty is a driver for poaching and for overfishing. And health expenses can also be a driver for overfishing, because if your only source of income comes from fishing and you need more money for something, of course you are going to want more fish. And on the other hand, we also learned from recent studies that cooperatives with formal access to social security are much more efficient and have been more successful to transition to sustainability. So we are working to close this gap. We are figuring out the numbers behind, if it's possible to combine private resources, public funds, and fishers' contributions, because we don't want this to be a gift. So they could cover the social security fees in exchange of very ambitious conservation outcomes. We are in the process of adapting this to the new reality and the new economy after the COVID. But we are very convinced that this is feasible and that this can be a game changer, not just for people, but for nature.
That's great to hear. Very exciting. So let's see, Angela is asking, what is Cabo Pulmo? So sorry, we've alluded to it several times, but could you say a little bit more about that region?
Yes, and maybe you can help me because I heard you are a fan. Cabo Pulmo is a protected area in the tip of the peninsula, in the southern tip of the peninsula, where 25 years ago, the local community decided to close the area to fishing and instead dedicated to ecotourism. This was like very futuristic 25 years ago. So they invited NGOs and scientists and students and everybody to design the protected area. They closed the area to fishing. And now, 25 years later, it's one of the most successful marine protected areas probably in the world. And just by diving a couple of times in Cabo Pulmo, you can find as much species as you will find like diving 8 or 10 days along the Gulf. It has sharks and big fishes and lots of invertebrates. So it's a very it's worth to visit. Hopefully this can be part of our journey when you all join us here.
That's right. That's right. We'll make sure it is. Okay. Let's see. We have another question. What other projects in TNC are we implementing in the Gulf of California?
Oh, well, we work, we have this capacity building program where we have had like staff from the Fish and Wildlife Service and from NOAA and from universities in Washington and everywhere. Like we have bringing the most like talented experts on each field to improve the capacities and skills of Mexican fisheries managers. And this has like an online component, which is becoming very famous now because we all know why. So we have an online training and also in-person training and on different subjects such as fisheries management, climate change, economy, leadership. We also work with all the states in the Colorado River Basin in the US in a binational program to connect the Colorado River Delta with the Gulf of California. We also have a coastal initiative to preserve coastal wetlands at a large scale. And those are some of the highlights of our initiative.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know that we have a partnership with the California Oceans Program to utilize a length-based app on the phone to help to measure pen shell scallops down in La Paz area with fishers. And in that way, it's a really easy way to figure out the health of your fishery and to make sure that we're using adaptive management to change the way that fishers are taking out scallops from the fishery so that it stays sustainable. So that's a really cool application that is used in California in other fisheries too. So it's always great to work with you.
And one of the highlights of that project is that women are leading not just the use of the technology, but the analysis of the information. So women are empowering to be the ones who help the cooperatives to make the decisions about the pen shell. The app is like, it's super easy to use. It's Poseidon. There must be information online. And as I said, California has been like the scientific hub for many of the technologies that we deploy here in the Gulf of California, such as this or FishPad and others.
That's right. That's right. All right. Let's see. I think that we have gone through most of the questions. There's just one more thing. So if you could say a little bit more about terrestrial protection in Baja, and it seems like so much of Baja has really been protected. Tell us a little bit more about the history of that and how the Mexican government has really come to realize the benefits of conservation on land and in the marine area.
Yes, land conservation has had more progress than ocean conservation. Over 30% of the peninsula, the land part is protected. And now there's in the pipeline, one of the only new protected areas that will be created in the next 3 years is here in Baja California Sur. It's like 3 million acres biosphere reserve in all the Sierra, and the main reason is that we want to protect the watersheds on which all these communities rely. We are in a desert. This is one of the driest parts of Mexico. The rainfall is about like the size of a pencil every year, and 90% of this water is captured in the Sierra, which is not protected. So local rancheros and farmers and NGOs have been during 7 years lobbying for this protected area. It seems that it will happen soon. And I think the land conservation is leading the way in the peninsula. And one of the many reasons that I think is that there's owners of the land who have been leading these land conservation initiatives. So all the land protected areas in the peninsula were originally promoted by owners, no? By rancheros or people who own the land. And in the ocean is different, no? Because nobody owns the ocean. That's one of my hypotheses of why one is making more progress than the other.
Yeah. And what about, this is just something I've been curious about, is aquaculture a burgeoning industry in the Baja region and Sea of Cortez or the Pacific side? Are you seeing, and if so, what type of aquaculture?
Yes, it's an issue. There was a boom for shrimp aquaculture in Sinaloa and Sonora, which are the states across the peninsula in the mainland. Sadly, most of these farms, besides being unsustainable, like environmentally unsustainable, were financially unsustainable. So much of them are abandoned now. And that still new land is still opening for new farms, even when others are not working. But we have also witnessed like a new trend of, there's like two promising initiatives of like aquaculture, like offshore aquaculture for fishes, not for shrimp, which is like, has a lesser of an impact and more benefits. And we are trying to find a role on that. We have not defined that, but that's one of the issues that we would like to be more involved in the following years. A marine spatial planning to define where and how to conduct the aquaculture, because we know it's the future, we cannot deny that, and this would be a good moment to set regulations in place. We would like to have a role on that. We don't know how or when.
Well, stay tuned, I think, right? There's more to be told and more to learn. And we'd love to check in with you next year to see where we are with that, as well as all the other projects that you've mentioned today. So thank you so much, Meredith, for your time and your expertise. We're so lucky to have you here at the Nature Conservancy.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Liz, and all the team behind. It's like amazing, the amount of people behind this, and thank you all.
And with that, we're going to wrap up. I want to encourage all of you to join us again next week to learn about the Himalayan brown bear and what the Nature Conservancy is doing to conserve this really precious, iconic creature. I will not be with you because I have a conflict, unfortunately, but one of my colleagues will be here to host. And we really thank you for your time and thank you for your support. Again, we will wrap up with the questions that we didn't get to or needed more information, and we'll send that out afterwards. So have a great day, enjoy your lunchtime, and we'll see you next time. Bye.